Hi, everyone. I am so happy to see that you're here. 40 people already. I think more will join us. So that's super exciting. I think it's super exciting also because this is the first event of this kind. More people might join later, but out of respect for everyone being on time, thank you. I think we should just get started. So an important thing to note before we actually get started for real is that let's see here. I'm just get present. Is that this event is being recorded? So if and it will be published on YouTube and the Learning Loop platform afterwards. So if you have any issues with that, if you don't want your face to appear anywhere on the internet, then please feel free to leave. That's totally okay. And if you ask questions to any of the talks, to Jacob or Anders, I do like to have your face on there so we can see your friendly face and actually see who we are talking to, right? So that's the only requirement. Thank you for being here at this the birth of a new meetup called Product Loop. I'm really thrilled to see so many join us today. Thank you. This is a special event, and every one of you are making history. We are making history together right now because you have chosen to join this very first Product Loop meetup ever. This also means that some things could probably be better. So if you have any feedback, then please reach out to me afterwards. And then the question is, why does the world then need another meetup on building digital products? I think there are plenty of gurus, authors, and masterclasses on how to do product right. I think what we see from them is that they all describe this product nirvana of doing everything perfectly by the book. My problem is that I have failed to meet just one person who has actually been happy about how they do product at the company. Every single one is saying, we don't do it right. Can you please teach me, or can somebody tell me how to do it, or why we can't do it here? Even when I've talked to people working in the right places like Google or Spotify, they still don't know what to do. Actually, they don't like how they're doing it. It seems that nobody is satisfied. And when I've attended masterclasses of some of the bigger authors within product or UX, they don't really give an alternative to doing it by the book. It's either or. I'm really tired of that. I'm tired of them not being pragmatic. I'm tired of this really dogmatic approach to doing product. I really, for myself and for everybody else, I just want to do good work. So I believe it's time for us product people to make it work in the situation that we are in right now and be satisfied with that, and not keep on dreaming about how it could be, right? So I think it's time to take action and be more pragmatic. So this is why this meetup is born. I'm interested in exploring the more intricate subject of how we actually make it work, like the real stuff, the dirty stuff, like of doing it right, make the things that the book write about happen in real life. So this is my pledge to you. This is what we'll try with the coming Product Loop meetups, is to give this pragmatic perspective. We have all read the books many times. We're all believers. It doesn't mean that we don't have high ambitions. Yet none of us have tried to work in this end goal product nirvana kind of environment, even though we've tried. So I would like to just level the bar so we can actually start moving and not dream about a place where we want to be, where we're never going to be, and start having a discussion about where we go from where we are right now, instead of where we want to be. So I'd like to go beyond the books and into practice with them. So that's when the product meetup was born. Today's topic is OKRs in practice. So what you'll experience today is two seasoned product people, both two product executives, a CPO and a COO, who spent years struggling on getting things to work. And when they finally thought they got it to work, something rocked the boat and they had to reframe the view once again. Today's topic is OKRs in practice, and we're going to learn how these product executives started using OKRs in their respective companies and formed it into something that worked for them, right? There's also another reason why I started this product loop meetup, and this is the little bit promotional part. So bear with me, right? Because product loop is a part of the learning loop platform. It's a mentor platform where you can learn more about doing product by talking to real people. It's a community for the more experienced product people. So you have to apply to get in to vet off the career switchers. And job seekers. It's for those people who have a few years under their belt and struggle to get what the book says to actually work. So they need to talk to somebody who have been there before to ask what they did, to turn the perspective upside down, maybe. So it's a platform where members can book one-on-one video calls with experienced product people to get qualified sparring to get help from others who have been in the same situation before. And I believe that this one-on-one format from mentoring and active learning is way more powerful than Facebook groups or master classes or this infinite number of Medium articles that I scroll through every single day. Especially when it's about moving already experienced people like yourself who have all the fundamentals in place, who have read the books, who've been there, right? Who actually just want to get it to work. So that's the Learning Loop platform. These are the mentors that we have right now. Today, one of them is going to talk. That's Anders Kragelund, is in the bottom middle, and hopefully I'll convince Jacob to join as well. I really hope that will happen one day. I keep on poking him, but maybe I'll be lucky. We will be lucky in this network group of mentors. Yeah, like I said, you have to apply to get in, and how we decide who gets in is, do you have enough relevant experience, and the challenge that you're facing, is that something the mentor pool can help you with? Because we really want to make sure that you actually get help and that is going to be successful. So go, if you're interested in having a mentor or talking to people, then sign up, apply at learningloop.io, and let's take it from there. Okay, enough of that stuff. Let's talk about today's menu. This is super exciting. First up is Anders Kragelund. Anders Kragelund was my first boss at the first real product company, you could say. And he's the reason why I got into management and product leadership as well, because he passed on the torch to me back then. So having Anders on board means actually a lot to me. It's kind of like the cradle of my product life, and I've kept in contact with him over the years and talked about stuff like this before. He did a similar presentation when I was the CTO and CPO of Lenus eHealth, when we started implementing OKRs there. So I know that this is top-notch stuff. I'm also super excited to have Jacob join us. Jacob hosts the biggest meetup in Copenhagen on product. So having him join another meetup, I think that's quite a scoop. I have no clue how I managed to do that. But we started talking in the beginning of this year and quickly got into product modeling or team topologies and how you make it all work. I had some really interesting discussions. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say as well. So welcome you two, and thank you so much for joining. Before we get started, I'd just like to run a quick poll. So I'm just going to ask a question, or actually just write in the comments, just so we know and get a sense of where we're all from. Could you just write the city and country that you're calling in from? A lot of Danish people, Sweden, awesome, United States, Germany, Poland, Sweden, perfect, Scotland. People who move, Berlin. This is so great. I'm so happy to see that it's a multicultural, multi-country meetup from the start. Thank you so much. Then next thing, actually, I think this is a good tradition, just actually to carry on from Jacob's meetup and the as well. I think this is a great opportunity. Thank you for letting me copy it without actually permission. But I think this is actually a good chance for people who are in exciting companies to just give them 15 seconds of stage time to just say, if you're hiring product managers or UXers or anything product related, raise your hand with the Google Meet function and just let us know that you're hiring. So Jacob, I can see that you raised your hand. Perfect.
So I also need just to figure out how you to use Google Meet. So we are looking for a senior product manager. And sorry, Google Meet says something, and we're looking for someone who really wants to work in product discovery, because we see that a lot of product managers end up going into project management. And we really want to have someone who wants to live with customers and understanding their problems and building solutions based on that understanding.
And can you just say where you're from?
Yes, I work as a CPO in a legal tech and cybersecurity tech called Comply Cloud.
All right, Comply Cloud. Thank you. And you're hiring senior product managers.
Yes.
The next one I see is Anders. Perfect.
Yeah, great. So I'm from Checkwik, and we do self-service solutions for the automotive industry, and we're looking for a senior product owner or product owner for our integrations and API field. And I'll shortly also be looking for another product designer, senior product designer.
Perfect. Anybody else? Rasmus? Unmute your mic, Rasmus. All right, no sound from Rasmus. All right, I guess Rasmus, you're free to chip in later, but we can't hear you right now. Let's continue then, and then start getting to the exciting stuff. So the topic is OKRs. So I'll just set up a question here. So what I want you to answer is, what is the biggest challenge you face right now in regards to working with OKRs? So please answer this question coming up. You should. Does it appear on everybody's screen? If not, then go to this is activities thing down in the bottom, and click that, and then click Q&A. All right, no challenges at all.
No, it's because you asked the question, but we can't answer the question.
You can't answer. Okay, man, this is okay. So just comment. Let's just take that instead, right? Let's just do comments. So creating succinct and actionable OKRs. So it's about writing the OKRs, right, Collis?
That's right. Yeah, just being able to the point, not belaboring the issue.
Yeah. And Adam is talking about OKRs for UX. So I guess it's like UX health and stuff, right? Are we having a consistent experience? Then Alexandra is talking about an output OKR. I can see they're taken by deliverables by stakeholders. Interesting. I've seen that as well. And the balance between senior leadership strategy and team empowerment. So top down versus bottom up. Alexander, tapping into and aligning with the rest of the company strategy to getting, I guess, other teams working with them or working alongside. Linking the OKRs with the active backlog. Same question from the Facebook group. All right. Yeah. And then that OKRs always seem to change dramatically every quarter. I think that's interesting, right? So are you going to keep your OKRs from quarter to quarter? Or are you totally changing it and changing direction? OKRs as a to-do list, knowing what we're going to build and writing the OKRs backwards. Yeah, I don't know, we didn't get to work that much together, Jacob, but I've definitely seen that at a shared company. Creating OKRs that the team believes in and commits to, while at the same time clearly contributing to the strategy. To stop the flow now, because then we can start again. I think there's plenty of awesome stuff. So making them actionable enough to really break them down from the overall vision for the company and delivering on them on a continuous basis. All right, perfect. There's so much stuff. All right, how do you fit OKRs into safe setting? Oh, I'm not sure that you're going to get an answer for that, but that is definitely an interesting thing, keeping it outcome focused in a safe setting. And then we'll just take the last one here. Doing the work and seeing the results that impact key results within the same time frame. So I'm guessing within the same quarter, or that you're writing them for, and so forth. All right, perfect. Super exciting stuff. So I think with that, those challenges in mind, I think that's actually a really good segue to the first talk. The first up is Anders Kragelund. He's going to talk about OKRs and product strategy in practice. So Anders, take it away.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen 1 second.
Interesting, Jacob. Are they built into the safe? Into safe, I actually didn't know that. I think everything is built into safe.
I don't think they've been safe. It wouldn't make sense to do OKRs if you're doing safe.
Exactly. Output. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, perfectly.
All righty. Thank you very much for the invite today, Anders Toksvord. That was great to finally get back and be with you. It's a long time ago. Anyway, my name is Anders Kragelund. I have been in CPO and COO-like position for the last 15 years. Mainly, I've been transforming physical products into digital subscriptions, ranging from music to car sharing, publishing, employee apps, and right now I'm working for a software service company that is doing self-service solutions for the automotive industry. So in terms of my experiences with OKRs and why Anders asked me to talk here today is that I've been doing it like now 3 times. I've been leading it 2 times, 8 cycles at Actimo that last year was sold to Kahoot. And now it's like the 6th quarter that I've been running it at Jacob that I'm a partner in right now, which is a remote scale-up SaaS company that provide these self-service solutions for the automotive dealerships in more than 20 countries. So that's a little bit about me, where I'm coming from, and what my relationship to OKRs are. So most of my experience comes from startups going scale up, and that's also what I believe is a magic moment, at least to implement OKRs, because there's like, it's just right there where we really need to tame all the wild shots. There's like a big need for like a common direction. We need to establish some kind of rhythm, and we have to keep that startup mentality, of course, but there's some things that we also want to get to like a new level. And of course, we have to show profitability, and of course, there's a lot of new people coming on board. And that is really what I believe OKRs are good at, in particular in this transition from going to a startup to become a scale up and long way into the scale up period. So creating directions and aligning organizational rhythms. That's kind of the 2 main things that I'm taking away over. Been doing this for a fair bit of quarters now. So also, it might not be that my context what works in my context will work in yours, but I'm sure you get some insights, some inspiration. I hope you get some inspiration anyway. Okay, let's just get started. So what is OKRs? And I'm 100% sure that most of you have that, but read the book or seen the film or etc. But I think what we all understand is that it's very easy to understand, but it's extremely hard to master. So let me just start like from the very bottom of the hill. And I think actually there's missing like a character in OKRs, because I think it should be called OKRs, because what we kind of a lot of get confused about when start working with OKRs is that there's something called activities, which is very often interlinked with key results, and we're messing all this around. I'll get back to that in a second. But of course, just for the ones who wants to hear about this for the first time, or the ones who already did it, of course, the objective is like a big, ambitious state of change, and it's probably somewhat uncomfortable. So it's a little bit hairy. The key results is, of course, something that is measurable, that is kind of digging in or moving into to support the objective and make sure that we go in the right direction in a measurable manner. And of course, now I'm just start writing about absolute numbers. That's one of the key things that I've learned. If you get used absolute numbers over relative numbers, then you're definitely a long way down the line already. Let's get back to this a little bit later. And then, of course, the activities, that is the projects we are always doing, the tasks, the experiments, the campaigns, the research, the opportunities that we're trying to mess around with, and they are trickling up to the key results. So that's not so much something that it's probably something you all have seen before. But I think one thing that actually was quite confusing to me when I started doing this was actually what's the architecture of OKRs and objectives. So in this case, I just tried to visualize a very simple company top-down goal, or three overall objectives about the company wants to have some kind of objective around revenue, something about activating customers, and maybe there's some strategic events that is also very important for the company to pursue. And underneath each of these overall objectives, we might have like a number of key results that add into this key result, into this revenue objective. And underneath every one of these key results, there might be an activity. It's just to make sure that we talk about the same thing, because whenever, at least if you haven't tried it yourself, then it's always just reading the book about where an objective and then a number of key results. But actually, what is the architecture? How will it work? We're getting back to that in a little second. But anyway, then I think one of the main ideas about talking about key results and defining that is actually understanding what's the difference between an objective, a key result, and an activity. And here's one thing that I hope the audience here can help me with, because that's not something I'm so good at, but you know, like I have an objective, and I want you guys to help me a little bit about defining some key results here, just to see where we are. So the objective is I want my girlfriend or boyfriend to love me like crazy. It's a little bit ambitious, it's a little bit unpleasant, uncomfortable, and it's definitely a state of change. So let's just. Can I just ask some of you guys just to help me with some key results for this objective?
I have one.
Yes.
She can recommend me to a friend, a colleague, a really high NPS score.
So guys, write it in the chat comment, right? And then I'll take a few to read up, and then Anders will comment. So please write your possible key results for getting your girl or boyfriend to love you like crazy. What would be good key results? Increase number of I love yous in the next 3 months. Interesting. We'll just have a few more before we start commenting. Anybody else? What would be a good key result? One random gift after the end of every month. She'll prepare dinner for me. I think that's a nice key result. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
It seems.
Yeah, you just take it on.
Yeah, it seems like everybody's challenged about this objective just as much as I am. But what's interesting when we start doing this exercise, and what actually also happens in companies when we start working with objectives and key results, is that everybody start shooting out activities. All the stuff that we want to do, like I want to give her flowers 10 times per week. I want to be a better boy or girlfriend every second day by doing X. And the thing about the measurability always ends up with, and I think that's actually the biggest challenge about OKRs, is that people think in activities when they have to think about key results. And it's that discussion about outcomes and output that we're going to talk a lot more about in a second. So that thing about the key result is actually the result of all the activities you do. So if you give her flowers or him flowers every day for every week, then the "I love you" sentence from the responder, from the girlfriend or the boyfriend, will actually be the key result. So they say "I love you," as somebody said, "I love you" likes 10 times per week, or it could be, I have some examples afterwards. But I think the reason why I just did this exercise, and also why we are talking about this, is that key thing about understanding the difference between outcomes and output. And you guys are product people, so you know that, but that is one of the most difficult things to get out in the company at scale. So we're going to talk a lot more about that. But anyway, this was just a short intro to what is OKRs, and most of you guys know. But the fact is that the activities is the thing that always missing in these discussions, but it's the main thing that people start shooting in when they have to come with something measurable. But anyway, let's see how it goes. The last thing is a little bit about the structure that, at least what I've learned, is working, about trickling it down through the organization. The company OKRs is, of course, set by the company or by a strategy. And of course, that trickles down into like some team OKRs. It might go both directions, of course. And then potentially some key results at the team level might end up with some individual OKRs. Personally, I've never really worked with individual OKRs. Team OKRs is what I see the most and works the best. And company OKRs might always just be like a top of the pie, at least in small companies. So team OKRs is definitely what I see we're working with most often. Okay, why OKRs? Again, for me, at least what I've seen doing this, is that there's like a situation in most companies, no matter how small or how big they are, is that revenue is like the key KPI that we always talk about, which tends to fill up all town hall meetings and all discussions, no matter where you're going. And that is just not what makes everybody go to work. It might not be what everybody actually has an effect on when they're sitting doing design or product management or financial things or support or customer success. It might be a little bit far away from everybody, at least from a motivational and forward measuring point of view. The other thing also is, at least when you're coming from a startup situation, like that situation about the CTO and the management or the founders, or the CEO or the founders, like really have come a long way by looking for a product market fit or something, trying all kind of stuff, and it did it fast, and there was somebody that was crazy enough to do it together with them. But when you start scaling, when you start become a scale up, then you can't do that anymore. But you really need to find out how to capture all that energy going in direction and channel that in the same direction. And that's the same with all the departments that starts becoming filled up. They start really want to do a difference here. But when we start growing, it's really difficult to see what happens on the other side of the hallway, and we're going in many different directions. So what we want to go to, at least what I see is really working well for OKRs, is like that everybody, and I mean everybody in the company, is part of understanding what is their contribution to the overall company goals, and where does that actually affect me, or where can I affect the company, and feel how I contribute. That's one of the most important things about OKRs, I believe, that dialogue. The second thing is like the thing about articulating the direction and really trying to boil it down every quarter, or sometimes it takes 2 quarters, or sometimes there's some OKRs that go through 3 quarters, and some is changing all the time. I heard somebody was mentioning that, but no panic. I really see there's some OKRs that is not that radically changing every quarter, but is articulating a direction, and direction is one of the most important thing, not exactly the details of the actual follow-ups. And then of course the dialogue about cross-functional outcomes. We are product people, and in product we cannot do anything without finance, without engineering, without support, without marketing, without sales, and same thing, sales cannot really do anything about anything without product, without engineering, and having that dialogue about when and who is doing what, and how our goals are actually contributing to each other's. That is one of the key things that every quarter where we sit down and discuss these OKRs, because it doesn't make sense that sales is trying to do one thing, product is trying to do another, and engineering is trying to do a third one. And we all see it all the time, unless we actually start seeing like, okay, what does sales need from engineering, and what does engineering need from sales? and it's a very, very, very good exercise. Simple, but forgotten. Okay, so let's just take the components here. What's the difference between a goal and an activity, or an objective and a key result and an activity? So this is the company that I'm part of right now. And if you're actually going to the front page of our web page, you can actually see our overall company objective in the very, very front page. And this is a coincidence for the exercise or for the presentation. But what, as an example here, you can actually see our goal is to increase the efficiency and profitability for dealership after sales. And that is the overall company objective that we try to achieve in everything we do. This is the company objective. If we're searching a little bit for what is actually the key result candidates in this particular one sentence, then you see like we are delivering that efficiency and profitability measured by customer satisfaction, waiting times of our people who's queuing up in the dealerships, and then the value added items, the things that we sell. So actually here, right here, if we've been working, this is working with this, you can actually go and identify the key results straight from the top down level. And that's also why it's been fairly easy for us to implement OKRs, because everybody knows where we're going and what we're doing. And of course, that's because we have a pretty strong market fit that makes this a lot easier. Okay, so if we're just trying to dig into one of these objectives that I just showed you on the front page, well, our goal might be our objective might be is to cut down customer waiting times in half by effective self-service. So okay, that's cutting stuff in half. That's quite a lot. There's a lot of people. We're serving 50,000 vehicles every month. So actually doing that at scale in 20 countries, that is something that is for us quite a big challenge. But anyway, if we're just going basic right away and actually seeing what is one of the key results that actually is important for us to reach this objective. That is actually self-service is always something to do where people need to use their mobile phone. We either have to send them a notification or they need to do two-factor authentication or something like that. And right now, this KPI, the valid mobile phone numbers, is terrible. In the automotive industry, we see around 75% of all mobile phone numbers that we have in any appointment is wrong. So how do we get that from 75 to 90% so we can actually trickle that up into our overall objective? That's part of it. Anyway, so that's just an example. And if you see another two, just like in the airport, you need to increase the pre-check-ins from 28 to 32%. That's what we've seen is like one of the key results that we really want to achieve by a lot of activities. And then third of all, of course, people who actually start using a kiosk for checking in also needs to increase to meet that overall situation about all the customers that's queuing up, trying to speak with an assistant or an operator that instead can go and self-service themselves. So anyway, this is just some examples. But if we're actually looking at that key result and saying what kind of activities or opportunities are we trying to go for the next quarter for this key result number one, to actually change this, there's a number of different activities that we're doing. And I think that's also where we quite often forget to go wrong, that we actually have to search for those opportunities in many different places. But in this case, implement a form validation, a mobile numbers, coach booking team on how to validate phone numbers when somebody's calling in. Is this really a mobile phone number, sir? Develop feedback system so the management is aware about where we're going. Create data quality webinars in different countries where we see the biggest challenges around data quality service and mobile phone numbers. And of course, also develop something smart about how our integrations are selecting the right fields from the data imports. So anyway, this is just an example of something that we've been breaking down and how we actually achieving with a lot of activities all the time following is that 75 changing to 75 to 65, 76 to 78 to 80, going towards that 90 thing. So that's the state of change in this case. So you all figured this out. It's all about the difference between an output, which is what we tend to do. If we just like rolling down the line, building products, we need new features, we need to do some usability improvements, but the outcome is actually what driving this, and that's what's impacting the company overall goals. And that's where we really see that we have a good experience in just talking about outcome, turning everything into outcome, all discussions. Okay, so there we just took the one with the girlfriend or boyfriend love me like crazy. I just wrote some key results here. Get spontaneous. I love you 20 times per month. Get a beer delivered in the sofa at every soccer match. Reduce meltdowns to 1 per quarter. And of course, there's a number of activities that we can do as the other side of the equation to actually get those key results. Anyway, don't do OKR everything. You know, that's also the difficult part. At least when I started doing this, is that it's you know, like where to start and focus on strategic changes over operational KPIs, because the thing is that OKRs by definition, and also what I learned quite fast, is that it's not the same as KPIs. We have so much data, steady state about like how things are going, leave that on its own in some kind of other monitoring system if you want to monitor it, or actually only focus on stuff that you want to change. And that is what I believe works really well with OKRs, and that's also why we do it per quarter. There is a state that works fine, or might be not working fine. We want to change that state. So let's just take an example. Sales forecast. Sales forecast suffered. You can see this curve. Suddenly we start dropping in sales. You know, like and a sales forecast or a sale is a KPI, but the OKR in this particular case is to get that sale traction back on track again. And there might be a number of key results how to do that. So the OKR is the change of getting it back to where it should be. Same thing with average response time. It's a KPI. You know, if that could be like engineering KPI, but that's actually just like something we follow. But eliminating the timeouts, for instance, could be an OKR. We see some timeouts, 5 timeouts every X. Let's get an objective to remove those and find the key results that actually makes us go in that direction. So change is again what I see OKRs are good for, because otherwise we'll die in defining too many measure points all the time. Then it's also about getting it under the skin, but I think that's more in terms of implementation. I'm in the lucky situation that I'm overseeing several departments. So typically I oversee product, customer success, support, and in some periods I've also been overseeing engineering. So therefore it has been easy for me to like kind of take it out and get everybody inspired by it and get those 4 departments aligned, and then you pretty much align most of the company because there's only 2-3 departments more. That's a big benefit. But the thing about getting it down, doing a presentation like this for the teams, make them understand, and playing the make me love you, my girlfriend like crazy with something that is very different from people's own background in the workspace, to make sure that we actually understand the difference between an outcome and an output. So anyway, this is just some of the examples that I suggest you guys try out. You know, like even when you're writing tickets, or when you're doing your retrospectives, or when you do performance talks, or when prioritizing, you know, like really all the time look for what is the potential key result that you want to measure this activity or this change on. I'm not going. You can get the presentation afterwards. So it's more the ideas about getting it in, talking about it, really make everybody else define their own OKRs and try it out. OKRs are cross-functional. I see there's many solutions to the same problem or the same opportunity, and that's what I just show by this simple objective that all of you probably work with at some point in time. You know, improve activation in terms of weekly active users by 25% before the end of the quarter. What we tend to believe sometimes in product is that we also have to build something, but it actually goes a lot wider than that, and you of course know that. But when we're setting the key results to a specific objective, it's not only product that has to have like a key result that they are following or setting up in there. It could also be product marketing, you know, increase in-app product tours by 20%. How does that affect it? Customer success, execute business reviews and activation with top 200 customers this quarter. Maybe engineering needs to eliminate some timeouts, because if we're not online, you know, nothing happens. And product, of course, increase notifications by 35%, and some external people might have to be closer to our customers. So I'm just saying that the cross-functionality around this is quite important, because otherwise it's just product running their own directions and making up all kinds of measurements that might not affect the little bit higher objectives. And you really have to have the company objectives in front of you, or get them up across the companies. Otherwise, you're just going to super optimize and play around with this for fun. But you need to make it cross-functional. You need to get all departments along. Might be two departments missing in the first round, but I'll talk about that in a second. good. Engineers are the worst. And when we start with that engineering dialogue about, hey, let's plan some great OKRs for the engineering team as well, like, oh, that's really uphill. Sorry if there's any engineers in here, but as you know, engineers, they're not good at guesstimating. That's something product do. Like, I'm a scientist. I work with real data, and you cannot measure that you're trying to make me do. And this is a non-scientific argument, like going in one direction and trying to put some numbers out and what you want to achieve. And product just tells us what to do. So how should we actually do something that gives a result in this quarter? Of course, I'm saying this with love, like a lot of engineers, I work with them all the time, but that's one of the first reactions that you probably experience that you're getting. And everything that you do in engineering, that first comes as a result or the outcome of that the quarter, 1 quarter later. So that is some of the stuff that you will hear from that. But of course, after implementing this in at least 2 companies now, in particular in the latest one I'm in here now, the engineers were some of the ones who hardly could work afterwards, like hardly could work without OKRs, because they really got to define those things, trying to look for the outcome in every single thing that they did, no matter how low level technology related topics it was or how much the product related it was. I'm really been amazed about how some of them has been taking this into them and really looked for that overall way of discussing what they're actually doing and what was important for them to do on different levels of the engineering work. Okay, you probably also read this in the book, and I can only confirm that, but it takes 3 quarters before it works. It's not an overnight success because you need people along, and people needs to contribute to this. And what you see here is I just tried to make like an overall schedule for what I've seen, is that when you are implementing OKRs, there's only one way, in my approach anyway, and that is the driving force is to do this top down to get it started. You might have some company OKRs that you as a leader or as a leading team say, okay, this is the main 2 OKRs objectives are in the company. How can we actually start working with that? And there's resistance towards all kinds of stuff, and also to OKRs. Of course, you have to sell it, and of course, it might be based on the current strategy. And the leads is like the one that in many cases has been me. It's a lonely ride in the first quarter, and because you really need to convince people about this. And Excel is absolutely fine to manage OKRs. It's an amazing tool, and you don't have to make it that complicated to get this. But anyway, the second quarter, some of the leads in the different departments, they start getting it, and the team starts saying, okay, how can we use this, and taking it into themselves. And this will take time. And that also means that 75% of the OKRs start changing now, because now we start getting like, maybe not pull from the bottom, but at least pull from the middle of the company. And they start seeing something that is important that, like not in the management focus, and team leads put that on. And then of course the team lead starts, like saying, okay, we can actually see it can do something. It makes some transparency and some direction, and Excel is still fine. Third quarter, that's where everybody else starts getting it. 75% of the people now probably touched it and maybe have been responsible for one key result as part of being part of a team. And then, of course, there might be some individual OKRs, and we start seeing a lot of the OKRs starts changing now, because now there's going to be pull from the bottom, and not all of the OKRs is now no longer relevant for management. So now they start living here and there around in the company. That's what I've seen twice now. And then you might consider a tool. I never actually used a tool myself. Excel has always been doing the job for me and the companies I've been. Because as long as you keep an Excel, or you're also forced to keep it fairly simple. And that's most important, because it needs to be updated every week from everybody. And if you make that too complicated and too many variables, well, guess what? It's not going to happen. So there's something here. And the first quarter, it's part of the rhythm. It starts becoming more autonomous. There might be actually OKRs being used that is not more part of like the overall architecture of OKRs, but people actually start just discussing outcomes as part of their vocabulary and why are we doing stuff. And that's really great. And I think that's the most important thing, not all the measurements, not all the graphs, not all the stuff. It's the actual articulation and dialogue about outcomes to send direction and create alignment across departments. So that's it. And the last point I have is just what also you guys probably have seen, this thing about making these big ambitious goals. And I think there's some kind of cultural clash between all the people who's writing these books are from America, and they work in another way and get motivated in another way than we do, I think. But I strongly believe, at least in Europe, what I've seen is that the thing about setting goals and never really achieving them and just running it. That's not something I've seen ever work. Everybody I work with, they like to achieve the goals, no matter if it's an objective or it's a key result that is ambitious. We like reaching 100% of goals. So there's something there that at least I've seen that didn't work for me, or at least didn't work for the European teams that I've been working with. So that's it. And the last thing is that the outputs are okay. It can sometimes be difficult to find an outcome and actually discuss outcomes and measure outcomes, but also it's okay. And I've had many key results that was built on outputs, and that's okay. Be pragmatic, make sure it works, make sure that we just get the dialogue to get in the right direction. Yeah. So that's what I had to say about that. That was my experiences. I hope you could use it for inspiration, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards here or afterwards. About the measurements, somebody talked about that. We can take that afterwards, but there's like some tricks to actually how to define them, how to get to 100%, how to change stuff that is not measurable into something measurable. That is the most fun part of OKRs, and having those dialogues with the tech leads, with the product leads, with the marketing leads, with the financial leads. I think that's very rewarding, trying to make something not measurable, but we have to be pragmatic. It's not scientific. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Anders. So let's just have 5 minutes of Q&A. So there are already a few questions, but please write your questions in the chat. So I'll just pick one to begin with. There's something about like, how do you get the numbers that you put in the key result? Do you just make them up, or?
It depends a lot on what it is. Because let's say that if it's a key result, could be about activation of customers. How many of our customers are active every month? Let's say current state is 35%, and we want to change that to 45%. So those numbers would be quite easy to achieve, both to define, because we're probably measuring already how many active users do we have versus how many total customers. So that is the simple one. The simple one, the same with commercial variables. I've always been thankful because sales are so transparent. It's getting more difficult when you're getting into like engineering. And one of the things that I've worked a lot with some of the tech leads around is that if there is something where like they cannot define, they cannot measure it objectively, really try a little bit like when we do time boxes, set what does the first 20% of 100% OKR mean? What does the next 20 to 40% mean? Have you gone through? What have you experienced? What's the 40 to 60%? So that discussion about what is that result? How can we see if we start going in the right direction? That is more a pragmatic approach and might be a little bit outcome oriented. But I think that's the most exciting part. But we have so many numbers everywhere. We have so much data, but I think the most important thing is just finding some absolute numbers to get that concreteness and tangible feeling of those numbers. I don't know if I answered the question, because it needs to be a little bit more concrete, I guess.
Would it be okay to change a number during a quarter?
Of course, pragmatic. It's okay also to, like sometimes we've been very ambitious in the beginning, and then after 2, 3, 4 weeks in, we see one of the OKRs didn't move at all. Then I throw it out. Let's not remove focus, because it must be because there was not enough energy in it, or we didn't decide not to do it anyway, or we didn't have the time to do it, or we didn't. So I really try to be motivational around this. So it's not just going to be tracking. You have to deliver on it because we set it up in the beginning of the quarter. As long as we go in the right direction with maximum speed, then that's what I'm using it for, no matter what department it is. Sales is a little bit different. They have to,
Yeah. And then there's a question here that says, is it a fair statement to say that any KPI can be OKR'd if we make the achievement of that KPI a relative improvement measure? For instance, grow revenue by 25% rather than revenue KPI of XXX million.
Yeah, I would always go for absolute numbers. I'm not really sure what the real question was, but I always go for absolute numbers because it's more tangible. Because we can always find stuff that is relative and it's fluffy, and in particular also if there's a sense of subjectivity about how far we are. it's just going to be too wobbly. So I always go for absolute numbers to make it concrete and tangible.
Can any KPI be OKR'd?
There's a lot of KPIs in this world, but I'm sure it can. But I think it's about a state of change. So it's about like if there's a trajectory, things goes like that. If you want to actually change it like that, then I think you can OKR it until you get to like a, sorry for my graph here, until you get to a new state. So the state of change, because you have to run for it only in a period. Otherwise, it's just a KPI.
Thank you. So next question here. So what if OKRs are built in a top-down way? So from leadership to employees, what should a product manager then do?
Well, analyze and find out what kind of opportunities that you have in product to support that goal. If you are, of course, OKRs comes top down, they come bottom up, and I think a good combination of them. But if you have a clear strategy and you have a clear dialogue about where the product is going, I think it's quite obvious there should not be any discrepancy. Product is there to build company, aren't they?
What I'm hearing is also that it's about the dialogue. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, because like if we, well, since everybody bottom up or top down is defining these OKRs and objectives, they have to talk about what is the outcomes of what they're considering to achieve here. For instance, also, sometimes we have had like from financial side, some objectives that it's just like, no, that's just business as usual. And then people challenge that. Okay, so the finance department might be out of the OKR scheme for a quarter because they don't have any state of change. But that dialogue just with finance and let everybody understand, okay, now it's just a bad example. In engineering and in product, that thing about whenever we start building something, when we make that one pager and we're about to invest in this, we always like underestimate. We start small and we believe this is going to grow by itself. But taking that dialogue about from the top management also is like, okay, how are we going to see this as an OKR in the next quarter? I think question might need to be a little bit more concrete, I think.
What I'm thinking when whether it's OKRs or budgets, I think talking about them and having a dialogue, whether it should be up or down or in or out or whatever, to me that's a fruitful part. Aligning, right? And so if you see something coming top down and you just say, okay, I guess we just got to do it, right? I would say no. It's a discussion. It's about saying, well, that can happen because we've got this, and this. So what should we do then? Not taking orders, but having a dialogue about it. And then, the manager then says, okay, look at all the different things that can happen, and you kind of get a holistic picture of all the efforts are.
So I see the last couple of quarters, we have actually been, I've been like let's say 2, 3, 4 weeks before the end of the quarter, I started asking the team leads, okay, so what kind of OKRs are you gonna have next quarter? Because they know where we're going as a company. They know like what we are going to do for the next 6 months, or what ideas, or what growth, or what challenges that we have. Like they know just as much as management about what should be measured next month. So it's always been the team leads who's telling, okay, what is the OKRs for your team for the next quarter? Then they kind of scope that out in 2, 3 objectives or 4 objectives and maybe a number of key results. And typically me as the overall head go around and give feedback around that, and also realize which one of them is doing something that is not aligned, and make them talk together, or realizing that somebody is gonna do something next quarter that somebody's planning to do this quarter. So actually facilitating that dialogue with what they kind of projected themselves they're going to do for the next 3 months. That exercise is so good, and we don't get down to projects discussing exactly what features they're going to build or what kind of opportunities they're going to hunt. We're just going to talk about, okay, how are you actually going to measure and those key results and objectives that you're hopeful all your projects is going to contribute to. So I think that's the dialogue. And getting it across.
We'll just take 2 more questions here. How are OKRs shared, mirrored, publicized between teams of different levels? And there's a similar question, would you use activities on all levels as well? both the corporate and not just team, but yeah.
We don't share the activities. So typically, I could have brought an example here, but let's just talk about the Excel. We have one Excel sheet, and there's one sheet for each department or each team. They put in their OKR in somewhat a formal structure, like with a number of weeks across, and that's the level of complexity that we're working with. And we're talking about sharing that. Everybody, it's a shared link. It's a Google Sheet. There's a link to it in our general channel on Slack. So everybody can always go and find it, no matter how often they're checking in on that. And then we take it out sometimes in town hall. We take it out on weeklies. We take it out on never on dailies, but so that's how we share it. And everybody has access to it, and you can
Cool. Then last question: any tips on how to OKR product discovery, as it will probably not influence a change of behavior within the same quarter?
Yeah, we've done it a few times. It's actually a long time ago we OKR product discovery, like big product discovery activities. But we've done that thing about, okay, let's say that we're going to investigate like a new area, a new object, a new field of our product, and we want to discover on that. Then we kind of divide it in percentages, some time boxes or percentage boxes, and just trying to do it that way around. And maybe X number of interviews from counts 20% to 40%. X number of experiments counts from 40 to 60%. So we just sit down and define, and that is outcome based, I know, but that's the only way we've been able to do it. But then there's focus on it. Everybody knows that there's product discovery because everybody just talked about when it's finished, or if you don't work in product or engineering. So actually seeing that thing that we are actually doing deep investigations and discovery, I think that's half of it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Anders. Thank you for taking your time and preparing and answering questions. Next.
Oh, as usual, reach out afterwards if anybody wants to talk more.
So I know everybody's muted, but I would give Anders a round of applause here. Next up is Jacob. I'm not sure if... Oh, you've got it already? Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, there's...
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So I actually wanted to start with asking about how you actually run OKRs in your company. So we just saw like how Anders does that. And I think there's going to be a lot of questions in this talk, and I can't see the text. So, but I actually just collected what a few people said when they talked about the problems they have with OKRs. And I just wanted to pinpoint a few things I'm going to address with this talk. So first of all, this is like not seeing the results within the same quarter as the output quarter. I'm calling this a time frame problem. I'll come into that. Then it's about making sense. The team believes it, how it contributes to strategy. And that is about having your house in order. And I'll come back to that. And then there's like knowing what to build and writing OKRs backwards. That's like literally, that's really where I think this talk comes into its right. It's about metrics modeling. And then there's like getting the understanding from stakeholders, and OKRs are taken as a deliverable by stakeholders. And that's back where we come to like the metrics modeling. So if it wants to do, and I'm going to say a lot of things that are quite different from what Anders said, and it's going to sound very different. But I want to highlight one thing, because one of the things that's different is that the key results, which are something you're trying to impact and measure, which are different activities, is also connected to something that is bigger than just the team objective. And the funny thing is, when Anna showed this thing, he actually talks about like some metrics that is on the highest level. So he's actually really doing this in his company, because the team objective we saw wasn't about customer satisfaction. Maybe it was about reducing times, waiting times, and so forth. But I think that's really a key to this thing that actually hasn't anything to do with like if you read the OKR books. So let's get started. Some of the things I've seen in working with OKRs is that objectives are set by management, and then the team comes up with some metrics. That could be like if we're talking about like by management, it could also be by a product manager, and then the team kind of needs to come up with key results. And the problem with some of that approach is that the key results doesn't really matter to anyone else in the team and maybe a team manager, and they don't really seem to matter in the big picture. So that's one thing that becomes a problem in OKRs. The other thing is that OKRs can become like small projects. It's like everything you do in your company is 3 months projects. You do something for a quarter, and then you gotta have to achieve that. And the problem is sometimes if, as the world evolves, the objectives change, you're actually leaving something behind like you would in a project, which is exactly what you're often trying to avoid by being agile. And the metrics is again defined by the project and not by the company. So let me try to go into what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to talk about product modeling, starting with what is a model, a fundamental question. I think most people know that. Then I'm going to talk about 2 different growth models, a growth model, a product model. And then I'm going to talk about like why OKRs often suck and how a model can help. And everybody, of course, knows what a model is. A model is a representation of a system, and we use models to understand things and to predict things, like a map. The interesting thing about a model is the question around accuracy. For example, a one-to-one map is completely useless because it might be super good at like a real world representation, but it really doesn't help you in navigation because it's very big. So the idea of a model is actually to create something you can use for guidance, right? Something you can use to do something. And that is, of course, a question because there's also models in pharma and other places where it's better to have the precision thing. But there is in this type of modeling often like the accuracy. Maybe the model itself is more important than the accuracy as such. So an example of this is weather forecasting, right? It's a set of equations attempting to represent the atmosphere for the purpose of weather forecasting. It's not perfect, but it's better than not having a model. It definitely fails over and over and over again, but everybody is guided by this anyway. We also know that not everything is true about the model. And I think that's also important to bring into this. But it's a good way of saying, should we go to the beach tomorrow? So it is a way to understand and predict if we should do something. So we're going to talk about 2 models today. A growth model is an attempt to represent if your business is growing. A product model is attempting to represent if your product efforts are creating the impact you want to have. And of course, that impact should lead to your business growing. And why is it important to have models? It is because if you don't have a model, your model is often just revenue generation or sales or profitability, which doesn't help much in either inspiring teams, inspiring employees, in actually understanding what you need to do to create impact. And what very often happens, you can end up in situations in some companies, and I've been in those, end up becoming very reactive. So you are driven by requests from customers, right? So instead of you trying to say where we want to go, have a strategic approach to where you want to go, you're just like, oh, we have a company over here that will pay for this. Let's build that because then we can make out. Then we can make like the next quarter, especially if you receive back. And I think I could just see something pop up about all models are wrong. And that's actually the next quote. It is definitely not Marty Kagan, but this is an image of Marty Kagan, but he's also saying this. All models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think that's very, very important to think about here because a lot of thinking about models is like, how are these useful to actually navigate a company towards success? So let's start with the growth model, and I'm going to talk a lot about B2B SaaS because that's the area I come from and have my expertise. So starting out, like, what is the best metric to prove your B2B SaaS company is growing? Can anybody answer that? And please, I can't see any comments, so please just unmute yourself and say something.
North Star, somebody says. ARR. CAC, CAC
alone, Anders. That can't be. Just really good at getting customers, but they don't pay anything.
I'm just reading comments here. Annual recurring revenue.
Nobody's unmuting themselves. Okay, so let's not take it long, right? But the growth is just like, can we sell? Will people churn? Can we expand and like upsell to people, or will they downgrade and pay less, right? So that's like the most natural thing, right? Are you making more money? And then you have like some good SaaS metrics. The new biz, like either you have massive order uptake or you have a really high magic SaaS magic number, as it's called. Churn is, of course, two ways of measuring that. You can churn logos like per account, or you can have churn MRR. Of course, churn MRR is often the most important one, because if you have a lot of small customers and some very big ones, you're whale hunting. Maybe that doesn't really matter. Expansion, downgrading, like how net dollar retention, can you actually sell more for the things you have? These are all very great metrics for measuring SaaS growth. The problem is they're all very lacking. So, and just to completely spell out what lacking is, right? What does it mean? Lacking is like your current customer is paying and then they stop paying, right? A lot of stuff happens before this in the customer's life. The simplest thing to understand is, right, customers have some activity and then they will stop having activity before they stop paying, most likely. So the payment itself here is a churn. Is a lacking measure. We will know this way less than other things we might be able to measure. So what could we actually measure that would be faster if we are growing as a company? By the way, this is also why you have a health score. So a growth model will measure something similar to these metrics, but it will be something different. It will be less lacking. So before I talk about like what could be a growth, let's talk about what is the optimal growth path. And what is the optimal growth path? And let me show you these two graphs. You are starting at the same point of time. You're here low on customer retention and fairly low on revenue growth per year. And you can decide between two paths here. One of them is you first have great retention and then you need to improve your revenue growth. And that takes longer, but you get there. Or you have great revenue growth and then you have to improve retention. So what do you think is the optimal growth path?
I think everybody wants the product led.
Yeah, which one is the product led?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? I'm
I
going to
want
leave
to
that
draw
to
a
somebody
straight line.
else.
Retention is the mother of all metrics. I love that. Hey, okay, so there's a big mixed results, right? Let me just say for the last 5, 7, 6, 8 years, I can just tell you that in practice, every single venture capitalist has been pushing for option B, right? It's been focused on growth first, right? At any cost. Right now, that actually seems to be changing. And of course, retention has also been important. But if you've been like really bold, right, it has been growth first. And the unicorn print even is like, and that means like if you become a unicorn, you have like a 300% growth in year 1, 300% in year 2, and then 200% the next 2 years. So apparently VCs really think, well, have been pushing for that, but a lot of VCs actually want companies to go through this option A, right? But how do you then measure if you have product market fit? A lot of people talk about product market fit. How do you measure if you have product market fit?
Should we write in the comments or should we?
Yeah, nobody is speaking up, so it has to like. But please speak up if you can.
You can feel
Sean
it.
Ellie's score.
Just
Anna, you
have
have to
something,
explain
right?
what Sean Ellie's score is.
Oh,
Number
isn't
of
that? Carlos, you do it. You do it.
Yeah, number of customers. Your number of customers will continue to increase because they're spreading the word that the service product is working, we like it, so it grows, like the hockey stick.
So Sean Ellis is like the mother of retention. No, sorry for
Growth
Net
hacking.
Promoter Score.
Yeah, Net Promoter Score, exactly. So
Okay.
he says, like, we said, I can't remember. There's something called, if 40% would recommend your service to somebody else or something, then his definition is you have product
40%
market fit.
rule. Yeah, that's also. I think not to be harsh, but I think like Zoom is a great example of why NPS doesn't matter.
I think
If you look at their stock before and after Corona, I think Microsoft just killed them with a shitty product. Not killed them, but they took away their entire market share by Teams and Meet, right? And Teams is not great, and Meet is like, well, so. I think I'm gonna be very opinionated here and say what I think. Retention curve will tell us. Yes, I can see. I do agree with a couple of people, right? So I think product market fit is critical in when you decide to scale. And I think the thing that measures if you have product market fit is you let the customer wallet do the talking, right? So customer retention, if they stay customer, it means that they want to keep using your product, meaning you are giving them the value they are looking for. And therefore, it is also a very good representation of product market fit. However, customer retention, like other things, is a lacking indicator. So we actually need a leading indicator of retention. And that could be engagement, Andre. And that's actually a good question. But what could be a leading indicator of retention? So unfortunately, there's not like a universal leading indicator, because it really needs to be specific to your product. And it's really something you can, if you are very have an enormous data scientist, you can actually get like a pretty accurate predicting retention number. But I'm going to give a few examples of how this could have worked. In a company I worked on some years ago called Trustpilot, and Trustpilot, they are a review company. So they have consumers come into a website and write reviews about other online companies. And the way they make business is that they then own these reviews, and then they can have the companies come in and use these reviews in marketing. So you can use the reviews in, like, show them on your website. You can come and have this Google seller rating, where you show up in Google with stars from Trustpilot, or you can use your reviews in social media posts. And that is literally what they sell. So it is primarily all their revenue comes from other companies. But for the consumer, it's free, because what the consumer is really producing is producing content for the companies. So basically, what would be a good growth model, like a leading indicator of retention? It would be if companies are actually using reviews in their marketing. Because if they stop doing that, it probably means that they will stop paying for Trustpilot at some point. So, and that could be, you can make it very complicated, right? I think this is just a very good thing. It could be something like, it could be monthly Trustbox shows. So it means that a new company coming in as a new customer, if they start paying for Trustpilot, or they even have a freemium model, which actually is just as interesting in product-led growth, because if they don't see the value, and the value here is that they actually use the reviews in their marketing. So either they have these like shows of these Trustbox where they show reviews, or they use these Google seller ratings, or they actually have some social media posts that could be through an integration. They might not be really using the product, right, or getting the value. So a growth model kind of predicts retention, and that retention is closely connected to getting the value you want from buying this service. So how companies are using reviews, you can kind of see, here it goes downwards. So it has actually been going really well, but when we come here to May, it starts decreasing. That's a warning sign. That's a sign of company health being a problem. So this is a growth model as such. A leading indicator of retention is actually used in fairly many companies. So Slack figured out that 70% of their customers actually sent the customers that stay customers, and you can hear that it's especially important for those who have a freemium model. But actually, the customers that don't churn is the one that sent over 2,000 messages, and I think they even have a time frame within 2 months. So Slack's leading indicator was that new customers, 70% of them should send over 2,000 team messages. Dropbox had the same. They figured out that a leading indicator of retention was if a user actually uploaded one file in a folder on one device, right? So if they do that, retention is this likability of retention is way higher. So again, they had a leading indicator goal of 85% of customers, and you can kind of see that then you can work towards that. HubSpot had like a quite different one, which is more about engagement. It was that the value proposition of HubSpot is that you get the value from the cross functionality in the product, the connectivity. So there is, again, they use 5 features out of 25 in their platform, and 80% of the customers use this. So the event is the key model here, right? And then you have an objective for that. And the entire point is that a growth model is something, and just as Anna says, it's something that gives you value. It measures good human behavior, and I think that's coming back to, you can probably apply the same for OKRs, right? It's not because increased website loading speed is wrong, but it's like it's almost like a sub metric to the important metric, which is increased conversion. If you are on a transactional, if you're in a transactional game, right? Another objective, which is bad, like bad customer sees value. The good one is process their first transaction, which is then an actual something you can measure. So the key event shows your value, measures human behavior, and you can set an objective for it. The thing about, and interesting about this, is you can display if you actually become better at winning your customers. Like if you increase your retention, your leading indicator of retention. So it could be that, and again, I'm talking B2B SaaS here, you acquired 24 customers in January. You can kind of see when did they actually achieve our leading indicator of retention. And not very many did that. It actually, for those who were in January, it took 50%, around 10 months to actually get to, it would have been Slack, it would have been 2,000 messages. But since you're hopefully working on improving this, you get better and better, and you can see here, maybe 60 something is where we turn green, right? And you can kind of see how that changes, and you come better and better at actually improving this leading indicator of retention. So if your goal is like 70% leading indicator of retention, you can kind of see here, we actually never achieve that. Here, we do achieve it, but it takes a lot of time. And here we start achieving it within like a reasonable amount of time. And that is, of course, again, an indicator of, will companies stay customers in B2B SaaS? So it's kind of like the North Star framework, but it's evolved a bit. So North Star framework, the value provided to customer, and the direction of the company's long-term vision. But it does come from, like, if you look at the original Sean Ellis, the true north, and that is the aggregate value that people get from your product, your value footprint. And of course, that's also why that should probably predict retention somehow, at least. Of course, a model is not better than how well it predicts, right? So for the companies that actually did achieve a leading indicator, how many of those customers were still customers, and those who didn't achieve that, did they actually then stay customers? Because this is like a verification that it's right. So that was a little bit about modeling for growth. And how does that fit into OKRs? We'll get back to that. First, we're going to talk about product models. Now, how do you know if your product strategy is a success?
It's used. People
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah.
It's part of our vocabulary. I mean, for me, I think for me, it's more about the conversation and the actions than hitting the numbers.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Usage, right? People are using your service or product. If they use it, they're going to have to pay it, or you get money from advertisers.
Yeah. Any other suggestions? I think this is a pretty. If you're a product leader, this is something you should ask yourself, right? And I think it's very fair to say, like, it's people know the product strategy at least is like the bare minimum. But actually, something that often goes wrong, right? So I'm going to talk about something I will call persistent models. And a persistent model, in my idea, would be a product strategy. And the important thing is that this model doesn't change. So it is important that it is a strategy that doesn't change. And it is important because if it changes, it wasn't right and it isn't a success. Like you hadn't nailed it. And of course we get smarter, but it's going to be way more difficult to work in the company if the product strategy keeps changing. And that is why, yeah, and I can see Paul, you're saying like leads towards a vision. That is definitely correct, but it's still a strategy. A vision should also be very stable, right? But a strategy should also be fairly stable. I'm standing here like 12 to 18 months. It won't be perfect. It won't measure everything, but it will create the stability to work aligned towards goals. And back to the question before, it will create this ability to do real product discovery work and experiments over time. So let's get back to Trustpilot. So let's say we actually had like 4 things we think is important. And this is things we actually model towards. How do we think we get people to use? If the growth model was like we want to use reviews in marketing, what could things we want to achieve be? So you kind of hear it's a little bit like like company objectives. But the thing is that these don't change. So Trustbox installed, shop integrations installed, claim profiles, and organic reviews. Just make it very clear. The important thing here is that there is a metric on the highest level for each of these B company objectives, or whatever you want to call them. But there's a high level metric. And here's like where you can talk. So you call those activities, right? And the question is where these are placed. And I actually don't really know that, to be honest, because I've seen that work everywhere, but we're going to come back to that. But I think the important thing is that you have like an overall idea of something you want to achieve, and it has a metric. Customers with more than 25 monthly with Trustbox reviews, shop integration installed, customers sending more than 10 monthly invitations. It could be claim profiles, customers with claim profiles that have logged in the last month, and organic reviews per week. And this is like things you could do. It could be something, some of this, if you stay logged in, could be activity, or some of these could be, so you can see all of these are what the Anders called activities, right? But activities also lives in different levels. So Anders, it's also a very big question, like where does these live? But let me try to move on. So this is actually what we did at Trustpilot. We had an ongoing metric, and we also used OKRs, but the metric never changed because it was always important to have more organic reviews. And this is actually stuff we did. You can kind of see this is where we started up this consumer team. You can see that the organic reviews have been somewhat stable for this time, going up and down, right? And these are then things we started to working on initiatives. And then we created some rating box, and you saw Christmas, and then we auto-generated titles, and we updated rating box, and you can clearly see the difference from we started doing these things towards like improvement of that metric. And that kind of talks a little bit into one of the questions before about the time frame problem, because within a quarter, the what we did with our objectives and key results didn't change much, but since everything was connected to a higher metric all the time, we actually could see if the strategy was working, if our single quarterly objectives and key results were doing right. So again, back to the consistency, this metric is always and will always be important to Trustpilot, because they don't have a business model if people don't write reviews. And there's a difference between organic reviews, means that it's an uninvited user that comes in and writes a review. But that's also the way you find new customers, because they will write reviews about companies that are not currently Trustpilot companies and not on Trustpilot. So it's a way to create leads. So you connect the growth model with the product model, things you need to do with the metrics, and you kind of have the North Star framework. But the important thing here is that the input metrics are very stable, right? Very, very stable. And I think that's where it's important. Of course, like your North Star just connects to the overall growth strategy. And then you can kind of use whatever framework you want to use. If you want to use OKRs, if you want to use, I think this is more like Terrace, the OST, the opportunity solution tree, right? You go back to like you have a metric that doesn't change. And again, it's not really described anywhere, but the entire point of this is that you have something you want to do and the overall metric doesn't change. So back to running OKRs that don't suck. So the first thing is have your house in order. So many OKRs, companies should not run OKRs. And I'm not saying this because honestly, here you said like, we're not doing it perfectly and also, but it's really difficult. And OKRs are not a great method if you don't have your house in order, because then it becomes tiny projects. And I'm going to talk a little more about it. And of course, somebody also mentioned this, right? You've got to have a vision, you've got to have strategy. If you ask me, you've got to have a model, and you also got to have some principles that helps guide in decision making. And those principles and that model is part of your strategy. I really like Martin Eriksson's inspiration by the Agile Manifesto, where you say like your principle is something over something, because that actually really guides decision making. Then we come down to a little bit like what Anders was also showing. You can call them company objectives or something. We can call them gold bets. And then you can kind of break it down into the team objectives, and the team kind of bits into what we want to focus on from these things. But coming back to, again, two things with this like persistent model. You have a one-pager of your goals and bets and stuff you want to do. And again, that's the team that's doing the one-pagers. But there is a head-aching problem. I think I'm going to jump into that. And also, maybe the solutions are down here, and maybe they kind of like also sometimes over here, and maybe goals and bets are also just kind of a little bit of solution, but not really. It's also something we want to achieve. That's why it's here, because it mixes up also in OKRs. And that's what makes it really difficult, because there's a time frame problem. And the time frame problem is exactly what somebody wrote, right? It is like, we now want to integrate better. That's the OKR. It's also part of the bigger thing. And what the team has planned to actually increase this metric, they will build a Shopify module. And how far will they actually believe they'll get? Well, that actually depends. So let's take a few examples. If they get that they won't get very far, they would have like not even an MVP. They would have the minimal slice. You can't build it all, right? That just shows a widget in Shopify, right? What can your key results then be? Like, what is your actual options for key results? It is like, we have 3 customers from Discovery saying that they would like this. Or like, we actually made it show up in Shopify. This is probably not possible, even like 3 customers have it on the website, because it like, why would they install that? It doesn't really work and very well. So are these good key results? The problem is nobody really cares about that. Like, if you go to the executive team, yeah, you'll be like, yeah, fine, 3 customer quotes, nice. It didn't really matter yet, right? Okay, let's say we have a thin MVP. It's like we have the widget we have in Shopify, and people can install it easily by 1 click, then it's set up. Great. And we can't really track anything, and there's no settings, right? So still, maybe we could call it a viable product. It's not really viable, right? It's just a thin product. It's not viable because it isn't where we think it's ready to be used. So maybe here it's fair to say that customers activated the integration. Maybe we could like get some positive reviews in the Shopify marketplace, but it kind of finds the same problem a little bit. Let's say we actually do have the full MVP, where we can actually track if people are using it, because that was the other problem. We actually didn't know if they were using that. We also now have settings, and now we can actually make a trust box. And trust box was showed 100 times through the Shopify integrations. That's great. So they had to find it, they had to install it, they had to set it up. But we actually did this 2 weeks before the end of the quarter. That's supposedly going to be a pretty good key result, because you actually obtained something. We actually proved that people could find it, install it, and set it up. That's why we're seeing this. But does it matter? It definitely matters to the team, right? We did it. Yeah, we committed to something. We did it. Cool. There was very little time, if not any, to actually show that this produces value. So are we moving the needle? We don't really know that. And there's the risk that we've now done it and we achieved our key result, which is 100% outcome based. That we didn't really connect it to anything bigger. Like, it definitely, on the tree, right? It was connected. We had something bigger we want to achieve. But coming back to like the persistent model actually really helps here. The persistent model really says like, okay, we still care about this next quarter. And next quarter is actually where we're really going to see if there's results. So that you have a persistent model in your product strategy matters both to like, if I'm as a product leader, see like, you did this, did it work? Because of course you actually showed this and you did something and great, and everybody claps, you did the right thing, you actually set it up correctly. But did it actually really move the needle? If we have to learn from that, we also have some form of thing that makes a follow up on this. And that's where a model is really important. Because of course, if you actually have this thing focused and like as a metric over your key result, then you also care about it next month and next quarter and in a year. So a lot of problems with OKRs comes out of one, you don't have your house in order. Like, you use OKRs just as a very weird way of setting goals, but you don't tie those goals to anything higher level. That's definitely not what we've heard today, but like that happens in some companies. And then I think a strong model can actually solve some of these time frame problems, where you actually measure across quarters, right? And quarterly objective needs to fit into the bigger bets, the model, the bigger things. And then of course, you also kind of need those bigger things to be described. And that's why one-pagers, which we didn't talk a lot about today, but one-page is a really magical thing. So the advice is kind of, you need something that makes it possible to span across quarters. Somehow, it can be models. It can also be that you don't run OKRs and you simply like say, this is something very important. Let's make this something we do for 3 quarters. We don't care about it. It will take us 9 months. and then the actual result is like something that really creates an impact. And then you just skip the quarterly planning. And that's also how some companies, it's more like a Kanban style development thing. And it's also easier in that type of setup to just like say, okay, we like everything isn't based on quarters in the real world. So that's a freedom you'll get. Yeah. So that was kind of it for now. I had a hiring slide, but now I said it before.
All right. Any questions? I think this is just to while you guys are typing or thinking about questions. I think this is quite interesting because it's two very different approaches to the same thing. And I think it would be interesting just to see, kind of be a fly on the wall to see what actually happens and like what is the outcome, what is the key result that you are getting out of it, or what is your objective, right? Does anybody have any questions? Otherwise, I'll just start by taking some of those that came during Jacob's talk. So there's something around. Well, yeah, Paul, you talked about in terms of what is a product strategy and vision. Could you elaborate on, and do you have a question regarding that in terms of that and OKRs?
If I have a question around that?
Yeah.
I think it was related to how do you know that your product strategy is working?
Yeah.
And I guess at least for me, I think if you have a clear product vision, then that state is also something that can be measured in some way, and you can see if you're moving the needle right and if you're on the right track. But I agree on the time frame as well, that this should be something that is at least 1 year away, if not more. So you can kind of plan backwards and kind of have this future back approach to see if that makes sense or if you need to adjust.
I think Paul, that is it's always very interesting to bring up the future back from everywhere and from Amazon, right? And I think that it's a good method in many ways. But it is also something where you need to remember that even though you're doing this, the future might change on the way. But again, what matters hopefully doesn't change as much. Because I think the most important thing about it, like how do you, and that's the basic thing of Agile, right? It's like how do you incorporate learning into what you want to do?
Yes, and learning can be about the metric as well, right?
Yes, but
I think an interesting approach, though, instead of saying, okay, so we are doing the amount of reviews or whatever, right? Or we need to have 20% of users doing reviews.
Yeah.
I mean, you could instead like do a definition of what is a good user or what is good behavior, right? Because I think if you change the metrics on the way because you learn, then you kind of confuse people. But if you instead, let's say, have a definition of what is an active user, and an active user is somebody who logs in 4 times a week or does 1 review every second time or something, then you just talk about active users. And you can say that you want more active users, but you can change the definition, the underlying definition, while you're learning what an active user is. Because sometimes it can actually be quite hard to actually know with the future that we're building what constitutes active behavior, right?
Yeah, and I think for the product model itself, I think it should be fine. Most companies should be able to find something that is always important, and that's also why I wanted to bring Anders's slide there into, because in their vision statement they really have 3 metrics, something you can measure, which will most likely always be important for them.
Before we take the next question here, Jacob, what is the number 1 action you want from whoever is working in your product organization with this product modeling? What do you want them to do, and what do you want the executives or whatever to do with this product modeling?
So first of all, the model itself is something you would probably work on every year or so. and agree that that's what you want to do. So it's part of product strategizing, right? And it is something where you and hopefully it won't change, and it will work a little bit like the same way. And actually, if you know John Cutler, he has like an entire methodology for this with Amplitude, which he now works for, on like how do you actually take this. And I think if you want to be wiser on how to actually run so that's like very much focused on the North Star framework, but they really build into this because Amplitude is a metrics company, so I love measuring things. But I think when it comes to this, it is about like finding those key metrics and agreeing on those being important. And the reason why that is important is because it creates stability in the product organization. And it also creates a very good argument for doing stuff which is not top down.
I'm just thinking, starting to embrace, having the other departments or teams embrace OKRs, like sales or customer success, or somebody who doesn't work within product. Then this product model seems like a very elaborate and complicated thing for them to understand. If we're trying to work together and understand each other's goals.
Yes and no.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, if your growth model doesn't connect to revenue, you're probably not doing it right. And there will always be, and I think that goes for everything. Also, if you have like company OKRs, there is some form of assumption in that, right? You are assuming something is right. You are assuming this will be good for the company somewhere or another. And that is just like, let's put it into a model so we can actually see the hierarchy. And I think one of the things I love to talk a little bit about, like this hierarchy of metrics. Let's say marketing comes, and I think this is something some of you might have experienced before, and say like, we should have higher NPS as like a important thing to work on, right? And we all know NPS is super lacking and depending on a lot of other stuff. If you cannot, and so your response should not be like, no, NPS is not the best metric to do, because it's so lacking that you don't really know if it's working. Your response should be like, yes, NPS is great, but there's a lot of underlying metrics that affects NPS. And what we should work on is those underlying metrics. In order for you to actually get your high NPS, you should care about these 4, it could be the product model, metrics, if that's what you're aiming towards, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't believe in the persistent model, it's wrong, right?
Yeah. There's a question here. It says, Jacob, could you repeat the association you are making between goals and bets and one-pagers?
Yes, it's because I think in general, you should have a one-pager on all of your solutions and bets, and the problem is it's never going to be easy. And Anders, you really got to fill me in here, because I'm really curious what you have to say. But like, there is definitely what somebody said, right? It's like somebody actually have a solution on a higher level in mind, right? And that actually might be more effective to run as a project. If we really want to do this, let's take an example. We have a competitor that has done something, and we just need to be on par with that. You can definitely do a lot of product discovery, but now you have to ask yourself, is this about like accuracy or speed? And sometimes that competitor is eating up your market share, and now it's just about speed, right? Then OKRs can be a great metric to do this, but you're truly just running a project, and you need people to collaborate, but now you're using OKRs as a project method. You're not letting a lot of teams decide what to do. Maybe there's something about the technology that might be different solution and so forth, but what we're going to do is not really discussable, or how much is up for debate is max 20%, right? The 80% is just stop the leak, let this competitor die somehow, or whatever you might be, right? And Anders, now you need to fill me in. What do you think? But I think So the association is basically that sometimes you have something on a bigger scale that spans across quarters, and you need to understand this. But it can also be for quarterly things, and it is because one pages is a great way to create an understanding. What are we doing? What are we selecting not to do? And that's why I will talk about one day pages another time. But that's
Anders, Kragelund, do you have any comments? There are some comments on your presentation. You're muted, Anders.
No, but I think it's back to the overall talk about product needs to be more pragmatic. The product didn't invent the world; the founder probably did. So I think there's also some people. There's a reason why some founders they actually see things other people don't see, even though it's not scientifically proven or we cannot put it into a model. Sometimes we just have to run after what he says or what actually the competitor did, was pretty smart. So I think it all depends. I think we just have to get to the other stage of all these models, and we are product centric and we are product driven, but sometimes it's obvious what needs to be done. You don't have to necessarily have to get a definition of what is the right way and how to measure it. So to me, it's more fragmented also about where we do these changes and where we double down on measuring stuff. Yeah, something is just also completely obvious. And of course, there's some metrics that run over many quarters, because something like activation or revenue or profitability or CAC or some good metrics that even though they're based on sale, then it's something we can affect in product. We just have to understand them and understand how our experiments can add into those. But of course, product discovery running over 5 months, it's difficult to make an OKR on. It is a project.
Yeah. And of course, Jacob, I can only say I can relate to the thing about the competitor. I don't know where you had that story from. Yeah. All right. Perfect. I think that is it. Thank you so much, Jacob. It was a pleasure having you. Great insights. So we are slowly rounding off here. So before you all go, I just want to make a little advertisement for the next upcoming product loop meetups. The next 2 are in the name of scale ups and this hypergrowth scale. So the first one is on November 24th, is a very design centric thing. So how do you scale a design team? And when you have designers belonging to different teams, how do you keep coherency between them and design systems, so forth? And how do you make sure that team members are intact as well after scaling up a whole lot? So if you got designer friends, or if you are a designer, or you're working with designers, this is really interesting. The next one in December 14th is about also scale ups. Magnus is going to talk about product and strategy deployment. So how can you go from plan to action, from strategy to actually making things happen, and how can you work with upper management in making sure that we understand each other. And then Anders, he comes from Linus. This is I hired Magnus actually in his position and left the company afterwards. So I've been in that battle with him myself. So I know that struggle, and it's really interesting what he brings. Anders Klang is from another Danish scale up approaching unicorn status, if they're not that already. He's going to talk about suddenly. Anders is going to talk about how to manage leadership when you suddenly find yourself having 40 references, where just a year ago you just had 2. How do you then manage to lead them all? So he's come up with a new model called peer leadership. That's quite interesting. So when you scale up like crazy like that, you need to kind of reinvent the wheel and do stuff that probably the agile gurus wouldn't recommend. So it's kind of making it work in that setting where you're going from 60 to 30 employees in a year's time, and faster than that as well. Of course, I just want to have a little plug again for the mentor platform. If you have questions about OKRs, I suggest you actually go book Anders. You can book him if you sign up. You can actually make a booking on him later this evening if you want to. It's $50 a month, and you get access to talking to awesome people like Anders, like me, and like a lot of other people. Send your application. I'll make sure to look over it right away. Thank you so much, and I thank you for being here for the first event. Thank you for showing up and supporting this. I hope you'll come back. It's been a pleasure having you. And if you have any questions, or if you got good topics we can talk about, or if you know somebody who should join this event, then invite them and let me know who to put on the stage. I would love to get help from all of you guys, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you so much.